We are both here with a new friend, and hopefully you guys know who he is. And if not, you need to check him out. His name is Wayne Jacobsen. I'm going to read you his bio, and then we're going to get right into this fun conversation. It says, Wayne served as a pastor for 20 years and was also a contributing editor to Leadership Journal. As the director of Livestream Ministries, he now travels the world helping people learn to live deeply in the life of Jesus and share it freely with others. He has written and worked with others on many books about spiritual intimacy and related community, including He Loves Me, So You Don't Want to Go to Church Anymore, A Man Like No Other, and The Shack. You can find his writings at livestream.org and hear his podcast at thegoodjourney.com. He lives in Newbury Park, California with his wife of 40 years and enjoys his children and grandchildren. So welcome to the podcast, Wayne. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, John. That should be the God journey, not the good journey. Although it's
the God journey.
That was my bad, not their bad.
Okay. I thought I got to check my Amazon bio here.
That's John's public school education,
yes,
rearing
right
its
there.
ugly head.
Right there in front of the world. Look, I can't even read the word God.
You heretic.
All right, so, we'll definitely link to all these in the bio too, correctly with the right spelling. Well, like we talked off the air before we start recording. Your name came up when Nat and I were talking to a really good friend of ours, John Lynch, and he's like, "You really need to reach out to Wayne and have him on the podcast." So I'm almost positive. I think either Nat or I think it was me, tried to reach out to you like that day, and then because of timing and recording and all that, we had to put it off for a little bit. And you've been very gracious and willing to wait as we figure this out, and had like Nat and I have said before, I've just been blown away by the amount of yeses we've been getting. So to the point where we were like, okay, we're recording like 2 months out now. But again, just thank you for coming on. Just as a good starting point, like your bio says, you served as a pastor for 20 years. I'm assuming that you are no longer a pastor. Could you kind of just walk us through some of those steps on how that journey went from being in the past and being as a pastor and then moving out of that realm into what you're doing now?
Yeah, I grew up in the faith, and when I was very young, had a very real connection with God in my heart and life. And it was hit and miss, scattered and here and there, but I came to know God as a real presence in the universe and a deep hunger to know that God. And I think I probably volunteered for full-time Christian ministry when I was 16, because I figured if I had to sit here every Sunday morning, I'd rather be the guy up there talking than the person sitting down here listening. I'm not sure how divinely driven it was, but went off to Oral Roberts University, got a degree in Bible, and then came on staff at a congregation in Fresno and was real excited. I thought, man, I had some answers. We're going to do this. And I've always been frustrated. My family's history with church is kind of hit and miss, with things that were good and things that were a little bit corrupted and a mess behind the scenes. And so I was there 5 years in kind of a growing mega church thing. And it just wasn't where my heart was. So I helped plant a congregation south of there for about 15 years. It's going to be a real alternative. It's going to be a community of house churches, more relational than institutional Sunday morning kind of stuff. So I had some real passion for that. And we had some good years together, and then some really horrible years toward the end when my best friend, co-pastor, resigned me Sunday morning when I was speaking out of town somewhere else.
Resigned you?
Announced my resignation, which I had not offered.
Wow. Oh my goodness gracious. Wow. How do you handle that?
Well, how I would have, being the third of four boys grew up on a farm, I was going to handle that by going back and caught you in a lie. I haven't resigned, so I can really fix this. And I had the authority to do it. I had the political authority. I had the appreciation of the people. I could have won that fight, I think. There was 4 of our 18 elders staging this little coup. And but before I got back in town, God put this little phrase in my heart: I have more to teach you if you walk away than if you stay.
Wow.
And I resisted that for a long time. I don't want to buy that. I want to fight. I'm not going to just walk away. My wife was the first to say, I think that might be God, what you're saying there. And before Sunday came around, I had finally concluded that was it too. So we stepped out at that point, and there was a lot of obviously rumors and things that were shared about us that weren't true because, obviously, you must have had a moral affair. You must have taken money. You must have done something horrible for all this to happen. And the elders didn't say anything officially, but the stuff behind the scenes was, well, I have some character issues with Wayne.
Mm.
And when I asked him later, what does character issues mean? It means you wouldn't go along with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't go along with the Pharisee council. So yeah, I got kicked out and got a lot of job offers right away to pastor. I was already writing, doing some traveling. So I had a lot of offers to get back into it. And something in me just said, no, what I'm looking for isn't there. And so it sent us on a bit of a different journey.
Amazing. No, I can say that for myself, and I mean, I can really resonate with that. I haven't had something quite as drastic as a coup, but I have been summarily dismissed, basically. So, and then had stuff said about me that was untrue. And there's, one thing I've come to the conclusion of, and I don't think many people would argue the point, but there's nobody who can hurt you like the church can hurt you.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something about that, that relationship that should be protective and should be loving. And so it's one of those things. It's like when somebody out there hurts me, I'm not super surprised. You know what I mean? I expect the world to act a certain way and to be a little mercenary in the way they deal with folks. And I'm always sort of taken aback by the way that the church does that stuff. And I shouldn't be, I should be more callous to it by now, but man, it just hurts and it wounds deeply. And sometimes if we're not careful, it cauterizes us somewhat to any kind of intimacy that might be there for us later on. So sounds like you had good counsel, that your wife counseled you well, and that God counseled you well.
I had some older brothers and sisters in our life then that really helped us walk through that. Like I said, it's a big club. You want to talk about people that have been dismissed by some religious institution. Yeah. That's a big club. It's a conformity-based culture, right? So as soon as you step outside the norm or what people want, the power people, they think nothing of cutting off your throat, cutting at the throat. They don't. Yeah.
Not at all. Not at all. I put something on Facebook a while back that was something essentially that said that there are a lot of people who won't celebrate you because you've outgrown the boundaries they've given you.
Oh,
and
that's right.
I found that in church to be so often the case. Was like there were boundaries not set by me. There were expectations set by others. And then as soon as I started to color outside the lines that you had drawn for me, suddenly now we're on the outs because I won't conform. And you're right, it is a conformity culture. And sadly, that's the case. We're trying to do things differently. I know you are as well, trying to create communities where those questions can be asked and where there's room to breathe and grow. And quite frankly, room to be wrong. It's okay. You know what I mean? The idea is that we don't ever discover anything without making some mistakes. But too often the consequences for those mistakes are so catastrophic that you just you stay inside the lines and you don't bother. But
yeah, and the biggest mistakes are made when you're trying to keep other people from making mistakes. Then you've got to create a power structure that does exactly what you say. It's very hurtful. Yeah.
It is very hurtful, and it's all too common. But so when you wrote the book, So You Don't Want to Go to Church, was that birthed out of this sort of experience, or is this what's the timing of that in comparison with you exiting ministry full time?
It really wasn't. It was probably about I wrote it probably about 10 years after my church experience ended. It's a fictional story. It's about a man named John, this guy meets on the street, who may be the Apostle John. I mean, there's some mystical things that happen. So this struggling pastor at a megachurch is going, this guy talks about Jesus in a way I don't know. And it's 14 conversations over 4 years of these two people. And this guy's sorting out, what does it mean to really live inside the love of the Father? And if we do that, how does that change the nature of how we view the church?
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Full disclosure, I'm about a quarter of the way through the book right now, and I'm really enjoying it. My first question, because after reading your bio and then starting this book, and like I said, I'm about a quarter way through. I feel like there's some biographical moments in that book. I don't know if that's on purpose or not. Just from knowing what I've read about you and comparing some of the structure of the book. Did you pull from your own experience, or were you trying to stay strictly fictional? And I'm just reading into it. I want to read into it.
Yeah, we did not. I had a co-writer on that as well. We did not try to stick inside either one of our experience. What we tried to do is create a fictional narrative that would get us to the same lessons.
Right.
So part of writing it autobiographically would be to out people that I don't feel like I want to out in a public way.
Sure.
So fiction is a great way to go. You just dive into fiction. Now we make up anything we want and allow this conversation to go on. So.
Yeah. I mean, so far, I'm loving it, and I'm definitely it's I'm definitely going to finish it because I love the narrative. I love the idea of this person just kind of showing up and, having these conversations with this pastor who's asking a lot of these tough questions. Right. And he's getting answers, but not the answers he wants and not in the way he wants. And
Right.
I really like, the tension, in those conversations. It's almost to the point where, I think he wants to see him again, but also doesn't want to see him again. Like, these discussions are painful, digging into some stuff that he doesn't want to answer about himself or about the church that he's involved in. And, so I think you've done a really good job on this tension of wanting these conversations and not wanting these conversations. It's done really well. And I highly recommend anyone who hasn't read it to pick it up and read it. It's really good.
Well, that describes my relationship with God too, doesn't it? I mean, there are times when God shows up and it's just sweet and it's wonderful and he really does some neat things and you want more of that. And there's other times when he shows up and he's poking holes in our illusions. And no one's likes having our illusions poked holes in. We pull out the duct tape and we want to duct tape all my illusions back together.
Right,
so I don't have to live the consequences of seeing through it. And I find that in my relationship with Jesus continually. I'm 68 now and there's some illusions Jesus is poking at right now in my heart. And I'm going, oh gosh, my response often to the Holy Spirit opening up some new avenue in my life is, oh my goodness, I hope this isn't true. And then in the journey, you find out, oh, it probably is true. And then finally, oh, this is true. And that's where transformation comes from. It's losing our illusions about ourselves, about the people around us, about God, about family. And when we lose illusions, that's tough because we built our comfort zones around those illusions.
Yeah.
And so church sometimes is that. We provide a good comfort zone for the religious to be medicated, their guilt, their whatever, instead of, no, this is a challenge. Walking with Jesus is an adventure. He's doing that with the disciples. He's always poking holes in their illusions about leadership, about, who's with us, who's against us. And I love that about the journey, but it's that kind of love-hate thing. You love it when you get the fruit of it. I always hate it when he starts poking holes in something that I'm going, oh, crud, you want this too. Yeah. And yet I'm always grateful at the end, always grateful to go down that road.
Yeah. No, it's, we've been talking a lot about, I even hesitate to use the word, even though I'm writing a book about it at the moment, but deconstruction that people have gone through. There's this sort of, I liken it to what Phyllis Tickle talked about years ago when she said, the church is on this like 500 sort of year cycle of reformation. And when she wrote this maybe 10 or 15 years ago before she passed, but she felt like there was another one, we were due. And I feel like there's a groundswell of people who are generally dissatisfied with the status quo, who are genuinely still in love with Jesus, and who are still wrestling with what it means to follow him well and willing to throw everything else out the window in order to pursue Jesus. And that to me is remarkable. There's not I wish there were more of them. There's still a lot who are clinging on to their institutions and their, for lack of a better way to say it, their paychecks and their identities and everything else that's wrapped up in there. But when those things begin to be shed and we start getting back to the truth of the gospel, man, it gets exciting for me. Like, what does that look like? You mentioned two words that I wanted you to dive into and unpack a little bit. You said something about spiritual intimacy though. And before I get your take on this, it struck me that is something that the church writ large, again, not pointing fingers at any particular, but just the church in general has struggled with intimacy when it comes to God. Like everything has been a structure and a way to, some sort of pathway to access the divine, some sort of obstacle course or something. God becomes a problem to be solved rather than something to be experienced. So what's your take on what you mean by spiritual intimacy, and how can we better access that?
Yeah, I think religion as a whole is fear-based for the most part.
I agree.
Fear-based is the opposite of moving toward intimacy. You don't move to intimacy with someone that you fear.
Right.
And I think that's the conflict I had in living in those two worlds, this passion for this growing intimacy with Jesus on the one hand. And on the other hand, I'm part of a religious structure that's basically a conformity-based machine based on people's fear about either heaven or hell, or about missing the good life, or about, abundancy or whatever. So it's always fear. How do I appease God enough to find my way into his blessing is kind of where a lot of it goes. And then we wonder why there's a difficulty to have real community there, because without intimacy and honesty and openness, and like you said earlier, the freedom to make mistakes, without an environment of freedom, transformation doesn't happen, because it's an internal reality. Spiritual intimacy for me means that we come to know God through love, rest, and play. That's where God's knowable. God's knowable inside those realities. And if we don't know God as someone whose love we can relax in, whose rest we can participate in, a la Hebrews 3 and 4, and to really discover that this God is a playful God, the Abba Father kind of thing, where we're playful children in the presence of a playful God, that my joy might be in you and that your joy might be full. This world, as you said, is filled with pain. It's filled with brokenness. It's filled with anxiety. And yet Jesus comes into this world in the incarnation as the ultimate expression of God's love and joy. So even though there's tons of pain and brokenness and oppression and all that, joy is the way we access the life of the Father. And to me, that grows out of intimacy. And for some reason, the way religious institutions work, generally, not when they start, usually when people are planting something new, there's usually a vitality and a playfulness and a loving, and there's all that. The longer it exists, just like my computer programs, the more they change my phone apps, the harder they are to work, right, and the less well they do, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's just true of anything. We make it more complex and we think it's better. It's actually not better. The invitation was not to come follow my book. It wasn't come to follow my church. It wasn't come to follow a leader. It was come follow me. My sheep know my voice. They'll listen. They'll follow me. And I think my passion the last 25 years has been teaching people to live loved by the Father, to be able to listen to the nudges, recognize the glimpses God's giving you into his way of doing things, and then joining him there, learning to join him there, and watch what that does in our lives. And unfortunately, so many people feel like, I don't even know what that means. I had one elder, there was a church deconstructing, and they were basically going to end, and not because anything bad was happening, just because they were hungry for something bigger than this thing would do. And I remember this elder, they asked me to come, and they wanted to share what they were doing, get some of my feedback with them. So I was kind of consulting while they were walking through this. I certainly was not encouraging the road they were going on, but I was at least giving them the pitfalls and things to look out for. I remember one elder turned to me and looked and said, this guy had been an elder for 20 years and a good one, not a bad guy, not a money power guy. And he looked at me and said, do you mean I'm going to have to walk with Jesus now? And it was really concerning.
Oh, wow.
Like, I have no idea what that means. And I think that would express it for a lot of people. We thought walking with Jesus meant we go to church, we read the Bible, we pray, we give money, we witness. If we do those things, we're walking with Jesus. Walking with Jesus means, no, he's a knowable God, and I get to know him, grow in that relationship where the unseen becomes more real to me than the seen world, and learning to live in that when it's
right.
Never complete, never perfect. It's always a mess. It's like we get glimpses and nudges of things. But how do we live in the mystery of God's unfolding purpose in our life? And in a world that demands certainty, and I want all my ducks in a row, and institutions obviously need that. You've got to need that to organize. You've got to get your bylaws in. You've got to get all this stuff set up. And we worked the mystery right out of it. We worked the love right out of it. And some groups can hold on to that for a while, but eventually the power of the machine eats out the reality of community for people.
Yeah, I think Nat and I have mentioned this before too. I mean, people are savvy. People aren't dumb. And they start to realize that they're coming to a building that's just a business. It's a business of putting butts in seats, keeping the coffers full so they can still have their laser light show. They can have the fog machines. They can call in those special speakers who cost way too much money to get even more people into the seats, to maybe hold on to more people in their congregation, right? And it becomes a business about spreadsheets, about how many people are coming to, how many people are we retaining, all these numbers that are business oriented. I work within a business that works within this world, right? What's our retention? How many people are we holding on to? What's our purchase rate, right? And for that would be, how much are they tithing? Are they tithing? Is the tithing going up? And all this becomes just this industry, and that's not what people are coming to for or coming for, and they can see through that facade pretty damn quick. And people are shocked that people are walking away from this monster that the church has become in a lot of ways. And I guess the question that I would have in all of that is, I see churches, and I'm gonna give Nat a shout out. I see his church and I see the way he does it well, and I hope that he holds on to it, right? But what is it? If the church is going to hold on, and if the church is going to become something relevant and meaningful and useful within the future, how do they hold on to that, like you said in the beginning, there's this love and this connection and all that. How do you hold on to that and not move towards this idea of running a business? Or is there even a way?
Well, yeah, I think there are ways. I know people too. I know fairly good congregations that I'll say exist in the world that really keep that. Smallness helps. It does. Once it gets big enough to be a machine and you've got certain deadlines and expectations you have to meet, but almost anything, here's the challenge. Anything that moves toward intimacy and transformative environment rather than conformity environment violates the business model on which the Sunday morning entity has existed for almost 2,000 years. There's a business model that underlies that, and all the passions for teaching people to follow Jesus instead of follow the church, to celebrate community that's real and transparent instead of posturing to look good, for a church not to be a comfort zone but the place where actually Jesus gets to confront my heart and I get to live in him and lean into him more deeply. All those things violate the business model. And so it takes enough courage on the part of leadership to say, we're not going to serve the business model. We're going to serve the passion of people's hearts to know the living God. We're going to become equippers of that. That's the reality. But it's an uphill struggle. It always is. Because then it's not as easy to pay the bills. Because I think what you talk about the business model, John, early on there, they're not selling the business model to people. What the business model sells to people is comfort. Come here, feel comforted in your relationship with God, enjoy the music. Think your kids are being well served in a children's ministry somewhere, so they're going to end up being really wonderful disciples of Christ. And so it sells this false comfort to people. And it's only when they begin to see through it that you're talking about, where people go, hold it a minute. Most kids at 18, 19, 20 are leaving the church of their parents. They're not staying in it. Sunday schools didn't do what people thought they would do. We didn't make Jesus engaging. We made it part of a ritual that may be more relevant to us than it is our kids. So then we revamp music sometimes. The music become more rock and roll, hopefully hold the kids. But we're doing the same stuff. What we're missing is there's a relationship with Jesus that's so vital and so wonderful. It is its own attractant. It is. But I don't think you can encapsulate that in a Sunday service. I just don't know how you encapsulate that there, because it's the way people live. And community is the way they live, love, and serve each other. And I find it hard for the sustainable business model to make that happen. And Jesus warned, when it comes down to God and mammon, what's going to win all the time? And I watched it from some of the best church planners I know, guys whose hearts I love, and they got into it for all the right reasons. But in time, their need to pay the bills, pay the mortgage, pay the salaries, pay the whatever, that compromises what they know to be true. And they'll say that to me. I know I'm compromised, but I don't know what else to do here. And it's a struggle.
It's an overwhelming problem, isn't it? I mean, it is one of those things that you kind of start to understand the reformers and go, you know what? I get it now. The need to maybe just tear the whole darn thing down and start over again is sometimes like a really compelling thought. Like, all right, clearly we've just deviated from the plan here. But from my perspective, that's why we planted this church. And so I'm one of those guys now that's like, okay, with the best of intentions, we planted this little church. And what was funny was, within the first 2 or 3 months of planning this church, I was falling into the same trap. I'm like, oh, now I'm paying attention to the numbers. Now I'm paying attention to the giving. Now and it took COVID to kick us in the teeth and send us underground for a year for God to really get into my head, into my heart, and reorient my thinking to the point where now if there's 15 people on Sunday morning, I don't sit there and stress and wring my hands about why. I love the 15 people who are in front of me. And I say to myself, actually, so for Easter, for a good example, for Easter, we had 40 or 50 and I was overwhelmed. Like, there's too many people here.
Oh my gosh.
I want to talk to everybody. I want to shake everybody's hand. I want to pray with people they want to pray. And I can't do that even with 40 or 50. I just can't do it. And I started to get my head around, like, okay, then what does pastoring a church of 200 look like? Really? It's impossible. Not effectively anyway, unless you've got a really great staff. So God is kind of working on me right now to grow me to be content with whatever that looks like. And we've tried to build a model of a church that does not need, it's virtually self-sustaining. So our income needs are very, very, very small. Nobody's paid. Everyone's volunteers. We have, anyway, so will that work? Ask me in a year. I'll let you know if we've stayed small and if we've kept things really simple. And but after spending 25, 30 years in churches where that was not the case, where we were always looking for the next big thing, how do we, everything had to be slick, everything had to be, it had to be professional, and everything now like seems like every week we do church and we're like you'd think it was the first time we did it. We're like, oh man, the mic doesn't work and the projector is shut off and it's okay, right? We're just trying to love Jesus the best way that we can and create a space that's safe for questions. And that's really kind of the driving force is this a place where you can ask whatever question you need to ask, express whatever doubt you need to express, raise your fist and shout at God if you need to. It's okay. And then let's find that place. I just keep coming back to your thing of spiritual intimacy and wondering, how do we cultivate a culture that prioritizes that over other things, because it's less tangible, it's less marketable, and it's less quantifiable. But so important if you get all the other stuff right. And then you end up with this sort of sterile experience where there's no intimacy. There's all this head knowledge, but no one's ever actually had an encounter with the living Christ. Then you wonder, well, what the heck are we doing then?
Yeah, one of my greatest conflicts when I was pastoring was reading the Gospels. Because I'd read the Gospels and go, Jesus isn't doing one thing that looks like my life. He doesn't have a Sunday morning service or a Saturday morning deal. He doesn't have a bulletin. He doesn't have mailing lists. He just is hanging out with people, helping them discover the reality of his Father. And people would come and go. It was more about conversations than it was about meetings. It could be, even the Sermon on the Mount was not a pre-planned rally with posters up downtown, trying to get everybody on the 15th of July. We're all going to meet on this hillside. Jesus seemed to live without an agenda other than he's just going to live in the world and see who Father gave him to love into his life. The time he gets 5,000 people together with a good meal, he chases them off the next day in John 6 saying, you don't want to eat my flesh and drink my blood. This really isn't about intimacy. This is about you got free lunch. This is your comfort. Right. And Jesus was very upfront about it. So I kept reading those stories going, oh my goodness, what am I doing? I don't have a thing in my life that isn't a pre-planned meeting with a time and a regularity. And it's not the spontaneousness of an open, hungry heart and a conversation. And there, the woman at the well, and suddenly she gets her whole family, and her whole family's there, and people are coming to Christ, not because they had a meeting planned, but simply because this conversation led to that conversation, led to that gathering, led to that thing. And I wasn't involved in anything that looked like that. And it frustrated me. And I told God, I remember praying, Father, what is it? Why is the way Jesus lived this so different from the way I'm living this? And it frustrates that thing you hold before God for like years. And then you look back now at my life and go, I don't have one thing I do now that's pre-planned, not one. I can spill into a conversation with somebody almost out of nothing, and then they want me to meet their family, and then something else happens, and somebody reads a book. And I just, I was playing golf last Friday morning and just tagged on with a couple of guys I didn't know. And we walk up to the 17th green, and the guy I'm playing golf with, he walks up, and he's a retired guy, taller, big guy. And he walks up next to me as we're walking on the green waiting for the other guy to hit. And he says, so are you a man of peace? I'm like, what do you think? He said, are you a man of peace? I said, well, let me ask that. He says, I don't know. Because I didn't know if that's a scriptural word, right? It's one Jesus used this in Matthew. So I'm like, is he coming at me with scripture or what's he doing here? And I'm not wanting to, take it all Christianese if he's not wanting to. So I just said, I'm not sure what you mean by that. And he said, I just watched you today. You're on a golf course, for Pete's sakes. And you're the most peaceful man I've ever seen. I just watch you, and you seem to be a man of peace. And I said, well, is this coming from some faith thing in your life? Like a follower of Christ? He says, yeah, I've been a follower of Christ my whole life. And I said, man, I said, that's good. I love Jesus too. I love him with all my heart. And he looked at me and he said, I don't love him near as well as he loves me, which is the traditional religious, I'm not good enough. There wasn't this humility thing. It was, yeah, I suck as a Christian was what he was trying to say. And I kind of smiled at him and said, that's not a competition you want to get into. And he said, what's that? I said, like, you want to love him as well as he loves you. Dude, we have no hope of doing that on any day ever. Right. I said, I just want to experience more of his love today so that I can love people around me. And we got into this for the next, on the 17th degree, so we had one more hole. We had this great conversation, gave him my phone number, say, we can get together sometime. I love that kind of stuff. And it's not me manipulating it. I wasn't out there to, get into a religious conversation with somebody. I just treat people like friends. I talk to them, I engage them. And usually the question will come up from them. And then it was, what do you do for a living? And I said, I'm a writer. What kind of writing have you done? And then they both turned out, they both read The Shack, loved the movie The Shack. So then we was co-author on that. So we got talking about that. It was delightful for one hole. And I gave him my phone number to call me. Let's play golf again because we could have 18 holes of this. But
that's amazing.
And I go to a town now. I went to a town and guy picks me up at the airport and we're driving away and he says, man, I got to apologize to you. And I said, what? He said, well, I invited you here for our house church, our home group. He said, everybody's out of town this weekend. There's no one here. And I said, really? He said, yeah, it's just me and a couple of friends. And I said, well, God knew that before I flew out here. So let's just see what that looks like. So we were sitting around his dinner table that night, just 5 of us. And there's a knock on the door. And his neighbor comes in and says, what are you guys doing over here? And he said, I got this friend from out of town. And turns out the neighbor was the worship leader for the big Assembly of God church in town. So he comes in and he wants to talk a little bit. And he goes, well, what's he love me mean? And so I just told him a little bit about what it means to live in intimacy with Christ. And you could tell, man, that tapped the deepest well of his heart. And he's going, I don't know what you're talking about. He was there till midnight. We're just talking. And then he said, can I bring some people back tomorrow? I said, sure. So the next day we had 40 people come into the house he brought from his church to hear this. And we get talking about the journey. There's one lady there that she raised her hand at one point. I was watching her through the morning conversation because she looked like she was deeply hurting. And I just depression. And she finally, she raised her hand and said, yeah. And she said, you mean to tell me if I don't vacuum the church on Friday mornings, I'm not going to go to hell?
Oh, man.
Holy crap.
And she wasn't kidding. She was dead serious. I looked at her and I said, have you been told that? She said, yeah, I got saved 6 months ago. I was told that my job was to vacuum the church. And she said, if I don't do it, I'll go to hell. And I said, no, I can absolutely categorically tell you, you won't go to hell for not vacuuming the church. I never told you that. Wasn't interested in who you are as a person. And then she asked some other questions. Just watched her over the next hour, just liberate. And then as they were leaving, we were together. They came over in the morning and we broke for meals now and then, but pretty through the evening. He as the worship guy leaves in the morning, he says, listen, we got church in the morning. Can I bring some people over afterwards? And I said, yeah, sure, go ahead. So I said, but be careful. You don't know what you're doing to your church. You're an employee there. And I promise you, if your pastor's telling people they got to vacuum the church to be saved, then this is not going to go well for you. He goes, I don't care, man. It's the best thing I've ever heard in my life. And so he brings another 40 people over, different people. And we had all Sunday together. And I'm telling you, I love what Jesus does in the spontaneity of life. And now I get what used to frustrate me because Jesus got to do it. And now I get to do it. Now I get to live inside that. And I just go, that doesn't mean I still fly somewhere and people have meetings and Wayne Jacobsen's coming to speak. But it's not, I don't ever show up with an agenda. I show up with, let's have a conversation. What do you guys want to talk about? And let's see where this thing goes. And it always goes someplace I would have never taken it if I just brought my prepared materials.
Yeah. Oh, man, I love that. That's not to turn this around and make it about me, but I'm going to. No, I'm just kidding. But that's actually, John and I have started. This is what our 20th. Well, no, I don't even know what recording this is. We've released 20 episodes, so we've been doing this since March, right?
Mid-March, yeah.
Mid-March, okay. So,
great.
And we
Welcome
started
to
out,
podcast land.
Yeah, well, we love it, man. We've got we're having a blast. But I would say, maybe John, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I guarantee you the first 10 or 12 interviews we did, we were like highly prepared, weren't we? Like I had questions written out. I'd read the material. I knew who the person was, or they were friends of mine anyway. So, and they, every time they deviated from the plan so radically that I stopped making a plan. Like enough of this. Let's just get together with people And we've had some of the best conversations with people. Up until the day we interviewed them, I might not have ever heard their name before, but I don't go in with any preconceived notions about who they are, what they do. Let's just see where this conversation takes us. And we might be very, very different people. Our interview with December Rose, I'm still thinking about, because she is so amazingly, radically different from most of us. But I didn't come in with all the information. And so that you're tapping into something, and it's resonating with me. It's what I guess I'm trying to say is the living in that spontaneity and being willing to go wherever the conversation takes you, and not having some sort of preset agenda is a really, really marvelous thing.
And I learned it the same way. I was going to places where I was teaching, and then after teaching, doing my seminar conference moment, always the conversations I had afterwards were 1,000 times better, and people would end up glomming on to the conversation. So I'd start with one person, I got 10, 12, 15, 20, 30, and I go, what's happening here is so much more real than there. I stopped doing that. I just said, forget it. So what do you guys want to talk about? You came here because you've read something I've read, or you've listened to one of my podcasts, something. So what do you want to talk about? Where's this working in your life, or where's it not working? Where are you struggling with God's reality for you, or God's affection for you? And yeah, it's always led to stuff that's better, but it's people have a hard time coming because they'll say, what are you going to be speaking on exactly?
Yeah.
Let's say God's love. Let's say that, because somehow it'll come back to that.
yeah.
But yeah, people want more than that. The seminar is what, and I just go, what the best things in life are when people are real and honest in the struggle of life, authentic. That's where real stuff, that's where God works.
Yeah.
God loves that environment.
Yeah, I agree, man. It's a beautiful thing. So, I've had lots of interactions with people over this, and what you just described, again, man, everything you're saying is just hitting me right in the feels. But I remember going to hear Brad Jersak the first time I went to see him speak someplace, and man, the talk was great, and he's a beautiful guy, and he's brilliant. And then we had 2 hours of conversation afterwards. That was some of the best things I've ever heard in my life. Just in sitting down at lunch and hanging out, and just I don't know, that was great. And what you're saying is true. The other stuff was almost infinitely better, because it was this organic, natural conversation flow.
And I bet you remember that conversation more than you remember his teaching. Yeah,
I do very, very much. I mean, in fact, I took notes. I'm like, hang on, what is that thing you said? It was but I'm sure John had a similar experience with Baxter Kruger when he came to Eureka to talk, and he and Paul came to do something. And didn't you just have the best freaking conversations afterwards?
Well, yeah, it was really weird. I mean, it was a really nice setup, really good conversations where we're all sitting listening. And then it was just, the conversation ends and no one wants to leave. And what makes that possible is the people speaking also don't feel the need to leave, right? I mean, that ends really quick if the person that you're there to see has walked out of the building. Literally,
that's
Elvis,
true.
The Elvis has left the building moment, right?
You heard me for 2 hours, I'm gone.
So if there's a willingness of the speaker or whoever has been invited into the church or the community or wherever they're talking to stick around, like you say, with no agenda, just to see where the conversation goes. So I happened to have walked, it was in a church, and off to the side was like a gym, I think. So that, if I remember right, there were like basketball hoops kind of pulled up in this room, and they had set up a table and selling books and all that. Well, Baxter's just happens to be just standing in that room, just kind of looking. So I just went up and thanked him for coming. And that turned into like a 45-minute conversation with just me and Baxter. And that's not going to happen on a regular basis. That's not going to happen. I mean, it doesn't work like that usually. And you're right. I remember that conversation probably better than the actual talk, because it was intimate. It was just one-on-one. I mean, yeah, other people kind of came in and kind of mingled within the group and were listening and adding stuff. But this idea, here's my question. And as I'm listening to you guys talk about it, I love this idea of like moving forward with no agenda. I have a 9-to-5 job, right? So my life is going to live within that world. Nat does too, where I have
9 to 5.
Well, I'm trying to be nice. Neither one.
Metaphorically speaking.
Metaphorically speaking.
Have a 7 to 12 job. No, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I work within salary, so obviously I don't really have a 9-to-5 job. But I do find that the most meaningful moments, even at my work, are those moments where I end up talking with somebody that I know or don't know. And it strikes up a conversation that lasts, I can't make it last very long. I am at work, but it could be like a 10, 15-minute conversation with somebody. And they open their heart to me for some reason about something, right? And it might be something really, really basic, but those are the moments that I remember from work. It's not hey, we got our numbers right. We made the sales today. We did this or that. It's that moment where this guy who I kind of knew stopped and said, hey, I'm reading what you're posting online, and I just need you to know that what you're saying online is really speaking to me. And I wish there was more people like you out there. Something like that. And that strikes a conversation of, he's like, so what do you mean when you say you're not a Christian anymore? And of course my hackles go up a little bit because I'm like, oh, which side is he on or she on this conversation? I mean, how are they going to take it? But it's almost always a beautiful conversation. We might not agree 100% on where we are, where we think that where we're moving towards, but those are the conversations. But how do you stay intentional in being unintentional? How do you stay intentional in not having an agenda? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do. I don't know that I have an answer for it, because I think I think for me, I got one out of my agenda. My agendas were never better than the things God orchestrated.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So when Jesus talks about, only do the things I see the Father doing, I used to pray that, hope for that, didn't know how to make that happen. But when I began to see that what God was doing was better than what I had in mind, then it made it easy to just walk in and go, I'm open for whatever. And I'm listening better. I'm hearing, not only just listening to people better, but I'm also listening to the Holy Spirit better, just because I don't have anything. When I have stuff, I don't need stuff. I'm practicing my stuff in my head. I'm getting ready to teach this. I'm going to start with this illustration. And I've got all that working in my head, so I don't listen well. When you go in with nothing and you go, these people are all here, they're supposed to hear me do something. I'm going, okay, God, now I need to hear you. I want to listen to these people. I want to know and just the sensitivity increases. And I think this is a lifestyle you get one into. I don't think it's one you choose. Because if you get there without anything and you're not listening well to people or to God, then it's just going to be a big silent fest, and it's not probably going to be all that much fun. So
right.
I don't encourage people to copy that approach. When I saw it in Jesus' life and said, God, I want you to win this in me, I didn't expect it to be, I'm going to copy the Jesus model. I'm just going to let the Holy Spirit lead me into a different way of living and thinking and relating to people. And he did over 10, 15 years. It wasn't like in a month or two. It was over a long season. Like I used to, like any itinerant guy, when I stopped pastoring and I was writing, so I had a lot of traveling opportunities to go speak. Your income security is booking 2 years out. Most guys who travel book 2 years out worth of conferences and churches and, whatever. But I was booked out on things, and then an opportunity would come. There's 50 people just spilled out of this church, broken, hurting, read a book of mine, like to meet me that weekend. And I'm going, well, you know what? I can do that in 2 years in the fall. Well, by then, the moment has passed, right? So I stopped doing that. I stopped telling people, listen, I don't book that far out. So if you want me, a guy called me a year out, want me to come to a Bible thing. And I said, yeah, I don't book that far out. He goes, what? He said, we have to know this year who to announce for next year. I said, well, then I'm not your speaker. He said, well, God has told us you're our speaker. I said, well, if God has told you, put it out. And when he tells me next February, then I'll know it's me. But right now I don't know it's me. And he goes, no, we can't work with that. So then it's kind of self-prunes your schedule, because there's people that don't want to work with. I'll let you know about 6 weeks before if it feels right. Yeah. Because I'm trying to leave space in there so the immediacy of people in crisis has first place, not Wayne's need to make a living is in first place.
Wow.
Yeah. But that's until you trust God to provide for you, you can't live that way. You just can't. No. You won't.
Wow. Yeah. No, you're right. That's awesome. Hey, speaking of which, you want to come out next year and speak? No, I'm just kidding.
Ask me next year.
I love that. I do love I love the God told me stuff. I was sitting in a conference or in a meeting once, and 3 people in the room all hearing 3 different things, all claiming to hear from God. And I'm like, well, God's lying to one of you guys.
Yeah.
Or 2 of you guys are just full of crap. And we've just used this God told me stuff as carte blanche to say whatever we want. Well, God said it. Who am I to argue? Well, I'll argue with you. because he's telling me the opposite. So let's cut it out.
And I love it. I had a close family person recently accused me of doing something I had not done.
Yeah.
And so I said, no, that's not true. You're being lied to. This is what actually happened. And he looked at me and said, I don't believe you. I said, you don't believe me? So I'm going to lie to you about this? Yeah, I think you're lying to me. I said, okay, well then I guess we're done. Yeah. And he says, God told me not to trust you. Yeah, now we're really done.
Yeah, we're really done.
I actually know the truth. You think you know the truth? I actually was there. I know the truth.
Yeah.
And he said, well, we're all going to know the truth someday. And I said, yeah, we will.
Yeah, we will. We will.
The difference is I already know it.
Yeah, and it will be better than people think. You know, this whole idea that at some point the truth will be revealed and it's all going to shake out. It's not going to shake out like you think. You know, it's going to be so good. Actually, I think it's going to be so beautiful. But no, I agree with you, man. As someone it sounds like to me that you and I have traveled some of the same little paths and gotten our tails whooped in some of the same certain ways and had stuff said about you, man. That's hurtful. It's hurtful.
Well, the founder, it happened to the founder, right? So Jesus comes. Yeah. He's the epitome of love and truth and light in the world. And he gets betrayed and denied and killed. So it's like, so every time it happens to me, because I'm going through a real major one of those right now, and it's not in a religious framework, it's with family. And there's a toxic presence in our family that's suddenly taken me on as target. And I'm easy to accuse about all kinds of things because they don't know. You know, I'm traveling, I'm doing things. So, you know, it's Wayne's doing this because of. It's always, accusers always go to motive because you can't disprove motive, right?
Right, exactly.
And they don't know motive, so they can fill in whatever motive they want to any action and make it look superior. So here I'm going through it again. I'm going, God, I must have kick me written on my back spiritually. Everybody just takes a shot now and then. And he kind of just, you know what? It happened to the founder. So you just go back and go, okay, when you live as love, when you're trying to learn to love in the world and be honest with people and be open and transparent, you are going to get slapped around. I'm just telling people that. Now just prepare for it. It happened to Jesus. It happens to me. It's just part of the way to live. But do you want to live love enough that it's worth it? Because Jesus even said, blessed are you when men lie about you, insult you, exclude you in my name. Because of me. And that's what goes on in my life. And that's a part of this living love journey too. It is.
Yeah, it's not one we put on bumper stickers and brag about. Like, come follow Jesus. I promise you'll be betrayed.
You get your buns kicked. Yeah.
You will absolutely be, you know. But the flip side of that is, you know, that there is such there's such opportunity there for really good relationships and really good, solid intimacy. I keep coming back to that word. You've got that word stuck in my head. I appreciate that, by the way. I'm going to ruminate on the word intimacy for a little while now and see what Holy Spirit has to say about that. But that's because for me, that's sometimes I just glum on a word. I don't know if you're the same way, but I just kind of go, ooh, that's the word. I'm going to chew on that for a little while, you know?
Yeah, things speak into our spirit. They capture us. And then it's like, okay, I want to explore that a bit more, which is really, really awesome.
Yeah. So, and I think you've touched on something then. I think you've struck a chord, at least with me anyway, just an avenue that perhaps the church has been lacking in moving towards this intimacy. I think we've sought experiences. I think we've sought those sort of mountaintop, you know, kind of, you know, God showed up and showed off kinds of things. And that's not intimacy. At least I think it can be the impetus for that. And
unfortunately, most of those are contrived, right?
Yeah, most of them are.
Yeah, that's the problem. I love when God breaks in and does something real. I've got a podcast now called My Friend Lewis, just a 12 episode. We've expanded to 15 because this is a guy who grew up abused in impoverished Mexico. And it seems like God put some people, even though he wasn't a Christian, God put some people in his life to help teach him some things. And then with the time, and this is, you know, I grew up a right-wing Republican, also white.
Also white ring.
Unfortunately. But you know, to have God bring a man to himself the night he's crossing the border as a 21-year-old and then actually helping him get across the border was just the most profound story I've ever heard. And I know this guy's a friend of mine. He's been a friend of mine for 12 years. And these stories start spilling out of him. So we started doing a podcast about this story. One of the people in his life seems to be an angelic presence. I don't know how else to explain what this guy does in his life to this fight. He's either a guy grooming somebody for something nasty, or this had to be some angelic or some divine man of God. He's spending time with a 5 to 7-year-old boy, feeding him, teaching him ways to live that change his life. And then comes back at the age of 15. The boy, now 15-year-old, has been taken hostage by the cartel to lure a friend of his to a place where they want to murder him. And that guy shows up inside the tractor trailer rig he's locked inside of in the middle of the night and helps him get out.
Wow.
And so we're telling those stories. He's telling that story. And then as we got to the end of the podcast, we did our 12 episodes. It was just going to be that limited series. On Good Friday this year, he comes over a few weeks before Good Friday and shares with me the night his father died, a horrible, traumatic story that he'd never told me before. And he needed to unpack it. He never unpacked it. It's horrible. He had PTSD from it for years. In the middle of that, on Good Friday night, he's locking up a church building, walking out to the parking lot, hears footsteps behind him, and it's this guy from his childhood, meets him outside this church, has not aged a day in 35 years. He's not seen him in 35 years. And the things he tells him are the most, so I love the supernatural when it's not contrived, when it's just real. And what I do know about the supernatural is I read about it in Acts and whatever, you cannot contrive it. God does these things when he does these things. And it's for us not to call them down and make them happen. It's for us to recognize when they are. And to me, that's what intimacy really is. We have a God who really loves us in a broken world. And he has a way for us to navigate. Even the pain I'm going through right now inside my family, God has been faithful to give me the nudges to navigate me through it in a way that actually is healing to my soul. I've been through betrayals that hurt for months. This one is very different. It's just there's wisdom each day, there's release in it each day, and there's freedom in it each day to keep following him, even though it's leaving some ugly things I'm not slapping duct tape over to make them look better at the moment. And it's angering some people.
And I find it very interesting that a church that follows a person, a God, a deity, whatever you want to call them, that lives in this mystery, shows us glimpses of this mystery, then wants to quantify and explain the mystery to us. And if they can't explain it to us, it must not be a real experience. And that's honestly one of the reasons I left the church is like, I can't explain an experience I had with this thing we call the divine or the Holy Spirit, but you want me to explain it or it didn't happen. It's not true. It's like, so you want me to take this most intimate moment in my life that means more to me than you will ever know and quantify it down to something that you can understand and then maybe use and explain to other people. And, yeah, it's definitely one of the reasons that I just like, I had to call bullshit where I saw it. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I was only 18 at the time. I didn't know how to voice that other than anger, right? I was just angry. And so I left and I went searching and I found mystery in places that, the Christians wouldn't go. I found mystery in the stories of Buddha. I found mystery in some of the Hinduism faiths. It doesn't, and so as I come back to some kind of Jesus follower faith, I have no problem saying that Buddha has shown me a better way to find Jesus. That Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Buddhist, has not given me some of the most inspirational things that point to Jesus. And it ruffles some feathers, and I'm okay with that. But we need to learn how to live in that mystery. And the church does a piss poor job on allowing us to live in that mystery without having to explain it away in a way that they can understand and then say, okay, yeah, that's Christian. And your story in the podcast, I mean, I'm definitely going to listen to it because that's the kind of stuff I want to hear. I want to hear these mysteries. I want to hear this. You can't explain that. He probably can't explain it, right? But isn't that more rewarding at the end? It's like, yeah, this happened. I can't tell you why, but it changed my life.
G.K. Chesterton said, once you pin the butterfly to the styrofoam, it ceases to be a butterfly.
Yeah.
And I think that's what religion does with God's stuff all the time. Systematic theology is not something Jesus gave us. It's our attempt to pin God to the mat. And then we can predict what he does. And God always thwarts that because God's not doing the things we humans, when our doctrines are simply the doctrines of men written in God's language, then God doesn't go with them. So then people think, well, God's not real. He's not doing the things he said he would do. He always does the things he said he would do. He's not doing the things we interpret him to think he should do
right.
on our behalf.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Yeah. I love how he lives in the world. I love how he lets us connect with him. I love that. And I'm always suspicious of people, I woke up today and I told God this, he told me that, I told God this, he told me that. I just go, oh my gosh, it's not like that. It's glimpses into a reality that's so much bigger than us. And he nudges us. We have an insight and we follow that insight. Something else happens. Somebody confirms something to us that I felt like God put on my heart 2 days ago. And you go, okay, this is God coming at me in a variety of ways to help me understand the path that will lead me to his life. And I love that.
No, it's beautiful. It's he's something that Brad Jersak told us a while back. He said something about theology, right? He said theology is simply it's a 3-year-old with crayons trying to draw a picture of God and then hoping that God likes it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
You know what? Yeah, that's it. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know what I mean? Except when we take it too seriously and we think that we've landed on something concrete. I go back to Pete Enns' book, The Sin of Certainty, which was part of my deconstructive process of like, okay, one of the things that I had to jettison from my life was a need for certainty. Because that's the Western mind, right? What did Baxter say? The Western mind, or the Celtic mind inside the belly of the Latin beast, which is still one of my favorite phrases he ever said. This is Baxter Kruger, the Celtic mind alive inside the belly of the Latin beast, and the Latin beast has lost its mind.
Wow.
But the beauty of mystery was just something that Richard Rohr has kind of given back to me as well. People like that who traffic in the mystical and the who say things like, God is mysterious. That doesn't mean he's not unknowable. It means he's infinitely knowable.
Right.
And so rather than try to squeeze God into some box and define him in some certain way, we realize we've just jumped into a vast ocean and we are just dog paddling, trying to figure out what all this God life is, man.
And we still have certainty, but the certainty is in the character and nature of God. It's not in the outcome we want or the theological view we have. The certainty is, I know him.
Yes.
I know he's got everything going to come out all right, somehow, some way. That's what I know.
Right. And because I know that, this uncertainty doesn't bother me.
Yeah, right? I can live in this. Yeah.
Like I can stand on the rock of God's goodness. I can stand on the rock of God's infinite love and mercy and patience and grace. The rest of that, then I have the freedom to say, okay, I don't know how all that plays out.
I love that.
But I'm okay.
Yeah. Well, and it gives you permission to delve deeper, right? So we use this analogy, right? That God is like an onion, right? You just keep peeling back the layers. And I'm not really sure that's as accurate as we want it to be, because there's going to be an end to that. You're going to get to the middle of that onion and you're done, right? So as we get into the quantum realm, right, and we start looking into the microscopic, and we start realizing that there's universes within inside universes. There is, as we get deeper and deeper into the small, right, that we find out there's a universe inside that universe. And then you can even look at on the expanded side of the macro side. And as we saw that the universe was so big, and then we're like, okay, no, that's not even close. We don't even know. And then there's so much more beyond that. So you can look at a micro level and you can go deeper and deeper and deeper, or you can look at a macro level and you can go farther out and farther out and farther out. And they both are this understanding of the love of this God that just wants us to listen and open our hearts and be patient and be present. And that, for me, is the beautiful part. And then, yeah, like you said, you get the nudges and you get these moments where people say something. It's like, I was thinking that, and now I hear it from you too. And they're like, okay, all right, yeah, let's look at that. And it's just being open to not having an agenda. And I just love it. That's.
And isn't that the beauty of the church, right? Because you and we're going to get just a little glimpse of what God is, and I'm going to say a little bit about his nature and character, and then I get my little bit near your little bit, and then near your little bit, and as people have different glimpses into who this God is, and we get together with each other, then the fullness of him. That's why the fullness of him is in the church. And I don't mean the church institutional. I mean the church as God's people on the planet. I think there's two. We were talking earlier about the tension off air, about the tension between church, the frustration and the encouragement and joy of the church. I find the way I've sorted it out in my heart is there's the church humans are building. That's one thing.
Yeah.
And there's the church that Jesus is building. and that's another. And those two are not the same thing. And people think they are. Just because we put church on the building or the organization, that's Jesus' church. Now, it may be. Parts of it are there, certainly, where community, transparency, intimacy happens. God's church, Jesus' church, is there. But the institution itself is not, by nature of it being an institution, the church. The church is people God's inviting to himself who are living in this intimacy. And when my peace gets near the peace, I fly all over the planet, get off a plane, and within 10 minutes in a car with somebody, I can tell you whether they have a piece of this God I know. It may not be my peace, it may be a different piece, but I know they know the God I know. And some people I'm with, I'm going, boy, they're so stuck in their religious ways still. Maybe I can help them find some liberty from that. But to me, the joy when I hook up with people who are getting a glimpse into the same reality that I'm getting into, man, that is the church of Jesus Christ in the world. And it's incredibly powerful and lovely and beautiful. I had a friend in Australia challenge me to go, let's only call church what Jesus calls church. So when people bash on the church or say the church, I left the church, I'm going, how can you leave the church? You can't. Man's version of it, yes, you can.
Yes.
God's version of it, you can't. You're still his child. You're still engaged with his body in the world. Just look for different ways God wants to connect you with his body in the world.
Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah, I think you're 100% right, man. Man, we've enjoyed this. I didn't even get to talk to you about the shack, but that's okay because there's so much other good stuff. And I do want people to know that you were intimately involved with Paul in co-writing the shack. And that is that's something that still resonates and still has ripples going out into the world. I just think it's a marvelous thing. It was one of those books that I read. I've told Paul this when we talked, and I reluctantly read it because at the time that it came out, I had 2 young girls at home, and my wife was reading this book, and she's telling me basically the premise of it, and I'm like, nope, I'm not reading that. and who was it? It was Baxter who said when he read the first 3 or 4 chapters that he was sitting in his deer stand. And he got to the part where, we know what happens. And he threw the book down and he said, by God, if this Paul Young guy gives me some tripe about God's will and blah, blah, I will personally take this to the end of my gun range and I will eliminate this copy from the world. And then he sat back down and read the rest and went, oh, okay, thank God he didn't do that. So anyway, I just, the beauty of it is that transformative view of God that is so intimate, that is so unlike what religious institutions try to market as God. Man, and the movie was great. And, but anyway, so I thank you for your contribution to that because it changed a lot of things for me. And I know I'm not the only one by any stretch. So you've had some deep impact in the world with that book.
Until it wasn't.
Until it wasn't. Well,
yeah. Until we got sued and oh my gosh.
I knew there were parts of that weren't great.
Yeah.
And, but at the end of the day, man,
there's a gift in the world.
There's a gift in the world and you're doing stuff that is just as remarkable and amazing. So
yeah, I was just going to add that. I was like, the shack is a wonderful part of all of ours history. Right. And I can't say that enough about it on what it did, but all that to say, you've written some exceptional books.
Yes, you have also.
And like I said, I'm a quarter away through one of your books and I'm absolutely loving it. And I love your story, the way you write it. I can tell you're a storyteller by the way it's written. And I know it's also a co-written book, but I really am looking forward to reading more of your stuff. And I appreciate what the footprint that you're putting on this planet.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
And this has been just an absolutely awesome conversation. Hopefully we can do it again soon sometime. Nat and I...
We can book it now for 2025, the way you guys are going. It'd be hard to get me now. If you need me 2 months out, it's not going to work.
Yeah, you don't book it.
Call me when somebody cancels. Say, hey, wait, can you jump in on Monday?
You don't book that far out, man.
We'll put you on the cancellation list and we'll call you if someone cancels on it.
There you go. That'd be a better chance, probably.
Oh, man.
But I mean, I think Nat and I have said this more often than we can count. When we get to these conversations, it's like, I could talk to you for another hour. I mean, there's just so much still left that we haven't talked about. I mean, we just touched the surface of this podcast you're doing. And
for sure.
Like I said, I'm gonna end this conversation. I'm gonna go download the whole thing and just listen to it.
Yeah, me too.
But again, I really appreciate that you're willing to take the time and talk to these two nobodies who.
Or we could talk for another
thought they had an
hour. If
idea
you're
about
going to listen to that again, we could talk for another hour. It's fine with me.
Y'all can stick around. I've got to go run a coffee shop. So
Yeah.